Welcome back to another episode of the Modern Patient Experience by Q Squared with your host, James Furbush. With me this week, very excited to have this guest on. He is the CEO of MetroHealth in Washington, D.C., Miguel McInnis. Miguel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, James. Pleasure to be on.
So how's your summer going? So for people listening at home, Miguel and I, we go back a few years to when you were doing some consulting at Athena Health. I was working at Athena Health, and so I'm just overjoyed that you could make the time to join us today. So how's the summer going?
Good, enjoyable. It's going too quick though.
Too fast. I know. We're happy or sad to see your daughter start her last year of high school. Has that happened yet?
Yeah, let me tell you something. Where does the time go?
I don't know. I've got one in kindergarten, and she just started, so I'm sure probably I'll be saying the same thing. Like looking back, even the last 5 years have been. I'm like, I don't know where the time has gone.
Exactly.
So, here we're talking about the modern patient experience, just talking to healthcare leaders about, how they're thinking about and tackling improving the patient experience at their organizations. I'd love to hear a little bit, sort of give me an overview of the work that you're doing, Metro Health in DC. You guys are an FQHC lookalike, correct?
Correct. So MetroHealth is a nonprofit integrated primary care organization. And as you noted, we're in DC. And we've been around for 30 years. And as an organization that first started out in the Ryan White space, providing support services to HIV positive patients, we've expanded to provide primary care services with a focus primarily on chronic disease management and widening and expanding our patient base beyond those who are positive. So as as we've grown and expanded, we've become certified as a patient-centered medical home and a diabetes certified provider that really recognize that in order to be an organization that's meeting the needs, the healthcare needs of the populations that we serve, which are individuals with multiple comorbid conditions, we really have to really start to rethink how we deliver care and deliver care in a way that's relevant to the patients that we're serving.
And that's awesome. So you have, I'll start off. So you have kind of an interesting take. One of the things that I hear from healthcare leaders, we need to start thinking about patients as consumers. We hear this a lot.
Mhm.
And when you think about the consumer, one of the things that you think about or you hear a lot is that the consumer is always right,
Right.
especially in service industries, and stuff like that. But you actually have a feeling the patient isn't always right. And I'd love to hear kind of please tell me more about that, how you came to that opinion and sort of what you mean by that.
Sure. You know what? Here's the thing. I arrived at this conclusion because patients don't always have complete information. Let's be honest here. There's a lot of noise out here. Yeah, we can Google information, but as much information as you find on one hand, you can find contradictory information on the other. And so I think the challenge really is understanding how to help reset the expectations for our patients. And so reset the expectations for our consumers. And so I think once we take that into consideration, you know, patients know exactly what they want out of an experience. So, for example, they want to come to an environment where they feel welcome. They want to have a visit within a reasonable amount of time. And more importantly, they want to feel like they're involved in the process. And so our focus has really been on trying to meet that and actually reset the expectation. So in other words, for us, it's about creating an environment where we are saying to our patients, you know what? We understand very clearly that you you're experiencing that health concern and health issue. Let's partner with you and figure out how we can help best support you in addressing this health issue. And let's do it in a way that makes sense from the perspective of how we can be able to support in terms of understanding what your concern is and then creating a plan of action to address it. And then lastly, let's do it in an expeditious manner. Because at the end of the day, no one wants to spend their entire day with their provider. And so, you know, especially in a in a time when time is of the essence, there's a lot to do. We are really focused on trying to reset customer expectations because I think the healthcare organization that really can understand patient expectations is really an organization that can create consumer value. Because at the end of the day, if your consumer feels that you understand what their needs are and and have set the expectations, you'll be perceived as more valuable in their mind and will come top of mind when it comes to the concern and issue by which they're trying to resolve. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And so it sounds it's a little bit when I hear you talking about that, I hear better communication, better education, and I think, patient education it's not necessarily like lacking, but to your point,
Yep,
getting the right information to patients can be a challenge.
it is. It is. And I think the challenge that you have is, like I said, there's so much information out there. And really, healthcare providers are really, in my opinion, should be sort of the go-to resource. And the challenge that you have has been in healthcare with so many competing demands, the patient visit has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And so what we do at MetroHealth is we try to balance patient care with patient education and providing resources and supports to be able to do that and to do that in ways that make sense. We recognize that technology plays a role in that. We recognize that accessing that information using a myriad of resources is important. So we're using text as a way of engaging with our patients because we know that patients are more likely to respond when you send them a text, especially if they're expecting it. And being able to access that information, particularly their portal information, and being able to get the patient the information pertaining to their disease process is very key. So we're using that level of technology to better help suit and meet the consumer expectations of educating them about their disease process and how we can work together to help meet their need.
Yeah, that's awesome, Miguel. I'm curious, like texting is such a great example of like technology that has changed very fast, as it relates to, I think, like just personal behavior. Like the idea that, I mean, my mom at this point knows if she wants to reach me, she doesn't even bother calling me. She just texts me. She just knows like that's the easiest way to reach me. And I mean, how do you guys as an organization, do you have a process or for like evaluating those sort of technology or even being able to like stay abreast of because those changes are coming fast. Like, it wasn't always like that people preferred text. That's been a change in maybe the last 3 years. But those changes are kind of happening often faster than maybe healthcare organizations can change with them. And so do you guys have a process for triaging those changes or evaluating them and thinking about how you add technology that patients may want?
Sure. I mean, at this point, what we have been doing is really utilizing our patients as our sounding board. One of the things that as a federally qualified health center, 51% of our users are 51% of the board consists of users of the facility. So that's actually a built-in focus group for us. And so we're constantly talking about with our board as well as our patients through focus groups what makes sense, what works best in terms of engaging with you. and we're constantly looking at different means of trying to connect with our patients. Now, the challenge is because there's a lot of technology that's out there, we recognize trying to titrate expectations as it relates to technology is pretty hard because the challenge is that one size doesn't fit. And you're right. It may our younger consumers may feel very comfortable around testing, but our older patients are not so much. They want to have that face to face visit. They want to engage, and so therefore trying to titrate that type of how we utilize technology is very key. So we are able to do that through direct engagement. As soon as a patient comes in for a visit, we're sending out a patient survey. Say, how's the visit? What can we do better? Are there opportunities for improvement? In addition to that, I'm working with our clinical team and working with other members of the team to get from them feedback that patients are providing. Because during when you engage with an organization, there are always little cookies that are dropped in different conversations. So it's really up to me and my leadership team to make sure that we're picking up those cookies to find out exactly what our patients are saying. And so we're doing that through engagement, through focus groups, through engagement with our clinical teams, as well as our broader teams as well, to understand what are you hearing from our patients? What are our patients saying? How do we best meet their needs? And what are they looking for in terms of meeting that experience? And so those are just some of the resources and tools that we're using. As you can imagine, some things we get right, some things we don't. What the reality is that it's a constant search because, like you said, technology is changing so quick and the expectations are so are are changing. Like for example, with COVID, you know, telehealth prior to COVID was probably about 5% of our business. During COVID and post COVID, it increased exponentially. We expect it to be about 40% of our business going forward because the reality is the expectations have changed among our patients. They want to be connected by telehealth, particularly for behavioral health services. And so it's now resetting that expectation with our consumers as well to say, well, telebehavioral health makes a lot of sense. Telehealth is not necessarily the best option when you try to do it physical. so,
Yeah.
so it's really that's really where setting consumer expectations becomes important, and then titrating that so that we are able to have an experience that makes sense for the consumer as well as for us as a business.
Yeah, and one of the things I remember you telling me was, I think it was around like access and scheduling,
Mhm.
where, I think maybe was it your patients who said that was not a good experience, and you guys sort of
Yes.
worked to improve that. And how did that feedback come from like the board and just this general sort of surveying patients and all of that? Like, how did you sort of identify that even something as simple as access and scheduling was an issue that you guys needed to deal with?
Well, actually, what was happening is that we have a patient complaint line, and we were getting a number of emails and were saying, "Hey, we're not able to access you. We're calling, and our calls are we're not necessarily able to get through as quickly as we used to." And part of the challenge that we found was the fact that we're just having an increased of patients, and so our former phone system was not meeting.
Yeah.
And so what we ended up doing was having to go back and rethink sort of and really explore how we go about the intake and scheduling process for that. So we actually went out and had to identify a new vendor with a new solution set that would integrate voice data in a way that made sense, that would help support engagement with our patients, we also had to create a new algorithm so that patients can then, when they're calling in, they're able to select how they're going to, who they want to connect to and to connect to quickly. But also, so it was a work in progress, and we're consistently, constantly monitoring it because as we're growing, we're recognizing that at the end of the day, the expectations are changing. And so we want to make sure that we're constantly looking at how long does it take for a call to answer? How long does it take for a patient to get a return call if they leave a voicemail? These are now metrics that we're monitoring as well. And we're using the patient survey, experience survey, as another tool to let us know where there are opportunities for improvement.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have like, I mean, as a CEO, I mean, I know obviously there's probably a lot more that you're concerned about, but do you guys as an organization have buckets where you sort of that the patient experience, right? There's obviously like the clinical, there's I mean, you even hear like the waiting room and things like that. But do you have buckets that you put sort of various aspects of the patient experience into that you have teams kind of working with, or how does that work for you guys at Metro
I
Health?
mean, I think we're actually, I wouldn't say we have different buckets for patient experience. I think what we do is what we process flow each, each way a patient can engage with the organization and look at where there are opportunities for improvement in the patient engagement process. Because our overall goal is really we're committed to provide our patients the highest quality, friendly care in an expeditious manner. And you know, at the end of the day, we want to create an experience. That's what it's about. And that's what's going to differentiate us from other players in the market. And that experience is really governed by our ability to meet our patients where they are. And so if our patients will call in and make schedule an appointment, we got to make sure that we're able that works 100% of the time. All right. And that they're able to get through and that we're doing so in an expeditious manner. If they want to be able to schedule it using our online resources, being able to do that as well. And so making sure that we're providing the, the portals that meet our patients' need. And then also at the same time, being able to acknowledge where there are opportunities for improvement and where there are things that we can't again, I think like telehealth really showed us that, you know, during the COVID experience, many of our patients were saying, well, we want to do all our visits by telehealth. All right. And we said, we can't. There's certain things that are just not going to work in a telehealth experience. And so resetting that expectation as to what the patient experience will be is important for us. And so that's something that we're titrating through our clinical teams as well. Because at the end of the day, I think, you know, if we're trying to make sure that our patients have a good experience with us, you have to set what that expectation is, and then be able to measure whether you're meeting it. And so that's sort of where we are at this point.
Yeah, what as I'm curious, what have you learned that you guys can't do?
You know what? I think what we've learned is that technology is great in terms of supporting the process, but it's not an end all be all in and of itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you mean as far as like clinical visits go, or just
So, you know, it's, if I can, I can have the technology to be able to do all the things that you want to do, but at the end of the day, if I'm not doing it in the way that meets your needs, then it's not helpful to you. So, for example, give you a case in point, as I mentioned earlier, our seniors are really looking, our older patients are really looking for the face-to-face engagement. All right. And when we said, hey, we can do this on by telehealth, particularly post, and now that things are improved with COVID, I basically were saying, no, we want to come in. It's great. We can talk, do certain things by video, but I want to talk to you. I want to see my provider. And so we're recognizing that we have to offer services that make sense for the segment that we're serving, and and we have to listen to what our customers are looking for in terms of their experience. And so that whole idea of one size fits all doesn't necessarily work. And so part of what we're going to have to do is really understand each consumer segment and be able to provide a service that meets that consumer segment, but do it in a way that creates a consistent experience. We want you to feel that you've been heard. We want to make sure that we're meeting your healthcare needs, and we're also doing it in a manner that is as expeditious as possible.
Yeah, that's fast. So do you have do you have like patient segments right now, or are you like working on that, or what's that
Oh,
look like?
yeah. Again, we have our 18 to 20, 18 to 35, 35 to 45, 45, well, 55 and over. And so each of those segments have different expectations. And we're looking to offer pediatrics in the next 6 to 9 months. So that expectation will be a lot different. So within each segment, we're really looking at how we leverage technology as a component of that. And then how do we engage so that the experience is meets the consumer's needs, but the service is standardized across all segments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and does it sort of change a little bit too with, I don't know, like help like I think about like my needs as a patient are very different from someone who has maybe chronic disease or comorbidities or things like that. So I mean, does that change based on the sort of health levels of?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
Because again, someone who has multiple chronic conditions, their needs are going to be more acute than someone who's, let's say, fairly healthy. And so, what we have done is we have created standardized patient processes, what we call care management processes, so that it's governed by the disease modality. It's governed by whether they're a new patient or an existing patient. It's governed by their age and influenced by racial demographics, gender, and so that we are making sure that we're meeting the needs of each of these particular segments, but also at the same time, it's also being driven by the market itself. Because again, we're given through through value-based care, our peers are now saying you have to meet certain care standards. So, and there's certain care gaps that you have to show that you're closing. So, for someone who is a 35-year-old diabetic, there's certain things that have to be done, which are very different than, let's say, a 25-year-old who's fairly healthy. And so, those are things that are also influencing our process as well. And so, that goes into helping to make sure that we are not only offering care that meets the health concerns of each of our patient segments, but also we're making sure that we're able to ensure that we're checking and closing those care gaps. Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to helpfully lead to a healthier outcome for that patient. Because for us, we are being judged by our ability to help improve the overall health of the patients that we are charged to take care of. Because at the end of the day, who wants to be in a relationship in which you're not helping, right? And that's how we look at it in terms of our patients is that at the end of the day, they're saying to us, what can you do for me? How are you going to help me improve my overall health? And so we're coming back and saying, here's what we're planning on doing. And so part of that also involves in terms of not only being able to standardize our process by disease process, by age cohort, gender, and the like, but also at the same time being able to ensure that we're creating the education, patient education component, so that we become partners in their overall health process. Because again, getting back to our original conversation, there's so much information that's out there. And in many cases, we want to make sure that our patients are getting the right information. The,
Yeah.
the, the information that has been medically tested, that is proven, so that at least at the end of the day, they have a plan of action or a care plan for how they can live the best life, best healthy life that they can.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I always joke. It's like, WebMD. It's all they've proven is that they're very good at like search engine optimization. It doesn't mean they necessarily have like the right information for patients, and that's a challenge I would think for a lot of organizations. Because I mean, I do it too, right? Like I turn to Google. It's the first thing I do if I have some symptoms. Like, what is this?
And here's the thing: remember, you know, Google's out there, but we didn't go to medical school, so context is everything. And so that's the big issue is making sure that we're able to provide the information that has been properly vetted so that our patients understand, particularly those who are newly diagnosed. Can you imagine being a newly diagnosed diabetic and you're now expected to change your lifestyle? And so, one of the things that we found has been the biggest problem that you have is you're overwhelmed. You're dealing with a new diagnosis, dealing with a new issue. Now you have to figure out, how do I eat? How do I exercise? What are the things that I need to do to now manage this new process? And so that's where also, in addition, as we're talking about technology and education, we're also having to realize that having the supports are important. And those supports are such as case management services, nutritional services, food bank services. One of the things that this COVID crisis has shown us is that there's a lot of individuals that are out here that are food insecure. And so making sure that we're able to provide or at least direct individuals where they can get access to food, whether it be through our food bank program or through food pantries, is important. And then also helping them to navigate our healthcare system. Because, hey, you may be able to get in for a visit here at MetroHealth, but if we have to refer you to a a, a provider or refer you on for admission, helping you to be able to navigate that process and then come back to us at the end is really important. So, offering those patient care coordination and case management services are just as important as in order to improve the overall patient experience. And so, those are some of the things that we're doing as well to help better support our patients as they start to as they navigate their health concerns.
Are those case management? Are those sort of relatively new initiatives? Or are those sort of put in place with the value-based contracting? I mean, how did
What those services were in place. The problem that we had was that they were silent. So now we have better integrated them so that if a patient was primarily utilizing our food bank services, that they're now integrated into our primary care business. And so everything is really driving, those support services drive our primary care, and then our primary care drives back out to our support services so that all of our patients are accessing the necessary services that are needed in order to help them address their health issue. And that's the reason why the patient care coordinator is so important.
I mean, it's
That's
huge.
Yeah, that individual serves as sort of uh, a how can I say operator.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's you just think about like I don't know, like how many people where their spouse is the one who's trying to navigate like the health system for them. I feel like there's just a huge gap, especially when it comes to like coordinating or like quarterbacking someone's care, dealing with like social determinants of health, which obviously, is a huge part of, if you don't have heat in the winter, that's going to have a huge impact on your health. You can't get access to healthy food. You talked about like food deserts and things like that. So it sounds like you guys are kind of doing a good job to accelerate or really kind of be mindful of that aspect of the healthcare system. Um, I'd love to know, do you guys have a way? Do you have sort of a few metrics that you use or outcomes that you're looking at that you're sort of measuring and holding yourselves accountable for related to the patient experience?
Yeah, I think first is ease of access in terms of wait time is another metric that we're using as well in terms of overall experience. So, in other words, what we do is we rate each of these metrics on a 5-point scale. And as soon as a patient has completed their visit, they'll get a text to their phone and they're able to answer no more than 5 questions. Pretty easy. And so we get that information real time and we're constantly looking at that. Actually, it's gotten to the point where we present that at our board meetings
Okay.
so that our patients, our board members are looking at how we're doing in terms of our ease of access, the customer experience, so that we're constantly holding ourselves accountable to see where we are and where there are opportunities for improvement.
And that's awesome. So it's kind of nice that like, and you said your board member, it's like what, 50%, 51%
Yeah.
patients.
Yeah, 51% of them have to be users of our facility.
So they know if you're doing a good job or not. I mean, if you're showing them the dashboards,
Yeah.
I would imagine would be a little bit scary as a CEO.
It is. It is because, but here's the thing. At first, it was because now you're holding yourself to a standard and you're being transparent. And so it was scary at first, but and we that's where I think setting the expectation is important because when we sat down and said to the board, hey, this is something that we need to do, not only because it's the right thing to do, but also it keeps us focused on what we're here to do. We're here to see patients. That's what we do. And so, and if we're not constantly measuring how our patients are reacting to the service that we're providing, what ends up happening is other noise can creep in. And so, in an environment where you're constantly competing for value, you have to make sure that you're constantly looking at where you are in relationship to your customer. And so, from that perspective, our board understood and our team understands because now we're constantly that is something that's also a part of our staff meetings, our monthly staff meetings. We're looking at how we're doing, and that information is shared with the team, and everyone has a role to play.
Yeah. What do you have initiatives lined up for 2022? Like based on all of that you're sort of starting to put in place?
Yeah, actually, we're looking to expand and open a new site in Eastern Market section of DC, and we're looking to expand that site. It's roughly about 9,000 square feet. We're going to launch in our first phase, roughly 6,000 square feet. But in that space, we're looking to offer the same services similar to what we're offering in our main site. But also at the same time, we're looking to offer lab and pharmacy services as a way of ensuring that our patients don't have to necessarily go outside our facility for those services. Because we recognize that, when you come to your physician's office, you now have to take time to go see a pharmacist. You're not going to take time to go get your labs. No. We want to make sure we get it done for you all in that visit. And we're looking to try to do that in a 90-minute time frame. So that is something that we're now working on. And that's something that we're going to be launching in 2022 to offer a much more, we see that as part of the patient experience and being able to do so in an expeditious manner. So that sort of gets back to my original point of we want to provide the highest quality, friendly care in an expeditious manner. And so for 2022, that's our.
So 90 minutes, walk in the door, have everything they need, walk out of the door, full
Yeah,
visit under 90 minutes.
under 90 minutes.
Does your head of operations not like you for putting that on him or her?
I'm sure my leadership team is, here's the thing. We talked about it as a team. We recognize that when you go to other organizations, who wants to spend 2 hours in a visit, all right, or 2 hours on it, dealing with health issues, or 2 hours doing anything, right? And so what we said is this: if we can get you in and we get you out in 90 minutes, that assumes that because we know that most people show up for their appointments late, so that's factored into that timeline. But what we want to commit to is making sure that you're seen by your provider, you get your patient education that you need, you get your labs that you need to have done, as well as you get your medication. If you can do those four things well, you'll want to come back to us.
That's awesome. I mean, I would think so. I mean, that's ambitious. I think we should have a check-in call after this is launched and opened, and see how it goes. But that's again, like I think aiming high is important. I think someone said in another interview, the problem in healthcare is we aim too low and hit the mark and call it good. That's amazing. Well, I can't wait to see and kind of hear how that plays out for you next year.
That we set 90 minutes as the target, but at the end of the day, as we continue to improve and look at opportunities for process improvement, we see that number decreasing, and resetting that expectation. So again, we recognize that at the end of the day, that's where we want to make sure that we're creating an expeditious, friendly patient experience, because we recognize that consumers have a lot of choice, and we want them to choose us. And so we want to give them every opportunity to do so.
Nice. Well, and so kind of last question for you then. For you as a leader, in the healthcare space, where do you go to find inspiration or new ideas related to the patient experience? Are you looking at other companies, books? Like what are what's in your idea bank?
You know, First off, for me, the- I think of the old adage. I grew up as a child. I was always just thrown into my head Matthew 7:12. Do unto others as you'd have others to do unto you. And I always used that has actually influenced just really sort of how I look at life. I know when I go to my doctor, the biggest challenge that I have is the fact that I have to wait, total wait. All right. And so my thing is, I look at what I want in an experience, and that's what I try to replicate. And then I start to look at where are there opportunities and who are the best practices that are out there. And so looking at how is Kaiser doing their patient experience? What's going on in other segments. Like I love my daughter now is at this point where she loves Apple. And when we're going to the Apple store, I'm constantly looking at
Yeah.
different experiences to help drive how I can improve my business better.
Yeah.
And so that's really sort of what, for me, I'm looking as a resource. It's just what are the best practices that are out there? Who's doing who is offering the best mousetrap, and how do I replicate that within my sector at my state?
I like the Apple Store one because it's like really interesting how they. I mean, they're still, I think, the only store where there's no actual checkout line. Like,
Yeah,
they have the person going around to check you out. They've been doing this for like 10 years now, and they are still the only store that doesn't have like a bank of cashiers. They just have people in shirts with a iPad checking you out, which is
exactly.
bonkers that is still so different, but it's much more efficient than having to stand and wait in a 31st line to check out and buy your goods.
And more importantly, you know what it is? It's more personal. Is it? I don't know if you've experienced it, but the fact that dealing with that one individual, I'm more than likely to buy something else. Because how many times have we gone on these? I can tell you.
Yeah.
How many times have I walked into that store? I'm only buying this, and I tell my daughter, "I'm only buying this," and we end up buying this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And so, but here's the thing: they figured out the fact that that one-on-one relationship is what keeps you coming back. The fact that you go there and you know that I'm going to speak to one person and that person will stay with me throughout that entire process. And that therefore I'll get in and get out quick. I don't have to wait on any lines. Right. And so if that's really, if organizations can learn anything, that's really what customers are looking for. They're looking for that one on one relationship where they can go to that one resource, be able to have the experience, a consistent experience that's been defined, that they understand and realize as value in a way that can get them out within the time expectation that they have. And so I think, Apple has gotten it right.
Indeed, Miguel. Well, that's a great place to land on. Thank you for making the time to kind of talk to us about MetroHealth and what you're up to there for your patients. This has been great. I really appreciate you making the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Talk to you soon.